And we're gonna select the top piece, Shift D to duplicate it, scale it down, and then you can rotate your orthographic view, perspective view, and just G to move it up, and scale it on the x-axis, and scale it down on the y-axis, and then from there just move it back just a tad bit so that it's not overlapping. We're going to then go into the edit mode, so you can tab into edit mode, and then from there start adjusting the vertices. So there's two vertices on the bottom. You can select both of them and kind of bring it down, because we're going to end up needing to add an edge loop to have a bit more control over the bending of the actual curvature of this piece. So you can hit Control R to add an edge loop, and then just select the vertices on the side, and then G and X to move them on the x-axis. You're gonna need to do the same for the opposite side, obviously, to squeeze it inward. But using the vertices, that will give you a lot more control over that shape and making it malleable and to actually fit that piece that is layered on top of it. So just move the vertices inward to bend the shape. Then we're gonna take one of these edges at the top, selecting the first row and deleting it. We don't necessarily need that additional edge. With the top row selected, we're gonna extrude upward, and then just scale it to fit. And we're going to, let's go to X-ray mode, and then just adjust the vertices from both sides by clicking and dragging to select the vertices in the front and background, just to fit that front part of the heel. And then selecting the top vertices, edges, just adjust that. And with the top selected, we're going to extrude up to that corner, extrude up to the next corner, and then all the way to the top. Actually, let's bring it down and then all the way to the top. Let's see, and with that, those two vertices selected, which will select a side and a face, we're gonna extrude and then create those straps. Now the straps are gonna show up on both sides, which we're going to end up adjusting to wrap around the back of the heel. Alright, so with proportional edit, you can end the edge selection mode, select the front edges while you're still on the side, and then just adjust the shape to add some curvature to it. Let's see. And from the top view, just bring that side edge inward a little bit, too much. And bring that one in. It may collide with the mesh inside, but you know, we have quite a bit of refining to do to get the shoe to our liking. So just scale up and down on your proportional edit tool for your fall off radius based on how much of the geometry you want to adjust. And on the back, I noticed that we have an issue. I have two edges that we need to clear of the bevel or the crease bevels or the weight bevels that I added earlier on the design. But before we do that, let's just adjust the vertices a bit more. And we're going to add an edge loop towards the straps end to make it a bit more sharp. There you go. And then from there, on these corners, I don't want it to necessarily curve. So what I'm going to do is hit Control B, and then I'm going to switch from edge to vertices to create a bevel with the vertices. And from here, I'm going to bring the shape all the way to 1, keep the segment to 1, and then just adjust the vertices, because I do want it to still be a quad and not an end gun. Right now, that front piece is an end gun, so I'm going to add an edge loop and connect these sides to create a quad, which is those 4 vertices. And as I'm doing that to this side, I'm also going to rotate and do the same thing to the other side. So I'm going to add a bevel to the vertices here and just adjust that a little bit. And then add an edge loop and connect. And then connect the, let's see. Actually, what I want to do is use one of the existing edges and vertices to get rid of one. So I'm going to connect these 2 vertices by hitting J to join. And then from there, dissolve this edge right here. Let's see. Yep, that works. So that created a quad using the existing geometry. Next, in the face selection mode, I am going to steal some geometry, steal some faces, just one really. Gonna Shift D to duplicate that one and separate it. Set the origin to geometry, that way I have a bit more control on it. Adding an edge loop, I'm going to add 2 edge loops actually, in order to be able to create a sharp edge, because this next part I'm going to end up adding a subdivision modifier. I already know that I'm going to need it, and I want it to be as square as possible. So just using GG to slide these edges. So double G. And then let's just isolate this. Control Shift, select that edge, and then S, Y, 0, just to align these edges vertically. Now I could have created a brand new plane from that perspective or right orthographic view. That would have saved me this trouble, but it's fine. I guess I could just fix these edges this way. All right. And then I'm going to also make sure vertically Z0, the bottom one straight. Just slide these edges a bit more. Again, this might be a bit fast and very intermediate for new users who are just learning about Blender. So I do recommend getting the fundamentals and modeling down, getting comfortable with extrude and just the navigation, vertices, edges, orientation of the Z, X, Y axis. All that will help you and your understanding of, being able to follow along with something like this, a tutorial like this, to learn to create the best high heels you can, For the button details, which I had to re-record because I accidentally stopped the recording while I was working on this, but it's going to be a lot of extruding and scaling to really just create this structure of like a pin for this button that will at the end duplicate to add just a little bit of flair to the overall design. So to start out, it's really a plane with a solidify to the modifier tab. The size or thickness is 0.005 meters. And from here, once you have that, you can apply your solidify in object mode and then add a bevel to it. And with the bevel, you can adjust to anything above 0.005 meters works. The segments add a bit more sharpness to it as well. I think 2 is sufficient. Add a subdivision modifier to give it that smoothness. Once you have that, then from here, it's just a matter of tightening up the geometry. So you can, in the edge selection mode, select the edge and click Alt to select the loop all the way around. Hit GG to slide it. And then do the same thing for the opposite side, to where now you have a lot more sharp corners. And you could do the same thing for the top and the bottom. You could add literally 2 edge loops and then just scale on the z-axis until you get it to be pretty tight, not overlapping, but tight enough to where now you have that block. And from here, what you can do is select the face and hit I, scale it in, and then hit I again until you have a third one. And to extrude, you're gonna go ahead and select all 3 of these sides and just extrude. And if you don't have the x-axis locked, you can hit the X and then it'll extrude it out. And then you could do the same thing for this one and it'll extrude it out. The thing to keep in mind is the edge loops. So right now, because of the bevel, you're all right. You don't necessarily need the additional edge loops, but if I want a bit more sharpness, I can go ahead and add edge loops to make the actual geometry sharper. And I could do the same thing here. Do the same thing here. And I think this is fine, but then you can add one here and add one here. So once we have that set, so we pretty much have our geometry, we could go in and try to make it as precise as the other one, but I just want to show you the steps that went into creating it. I think the best way to go about this is to have had created the geometry before. We would have needed to create the geometry to where we know that we need edges in the back. Again, with this being deleted, I just wanted to sort of show you the process. I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of edge loops here. So just going to add edge loops here and edge loops here, and it shouldn't distort the geometry because it's all blocks anyway. It's a lot of unnecessary extra geometry, so the most efficient way would have been to create all of the subdivisions we needed from the beginning to reduce the amount of geometry that would actually create to where we wouldn't even need to do the step. But from here, it's literally just selecting the faces, and you could ask Y scale them A and extrude. And then from here, we can add 2 edge loops and then X to scale those. And then from here, it's just a matter of selecting these faces, E extrude up, and then you can add 2 edge loops here, scale them on the Z axis. GG to slide them up. Oh, might need to do them one at a time. And from there, this is going to be a little tricky, but you can still do it. You can manage to select the 3 faces on the inside and then extrude. Now, depending on your model's layers and the thickness, this is what would determine how far on the x-axis you would go and how much space you would need. But again, most eyes are not going to be that closed into the object. And with the bevel already with the bevel modifier, it adds those edges, but sometimes you'll come across errors and mistakes, errors like this, and that's because of either pose or the lack of geometry. So adding edge loops right here can resolve that, or any artifact issues that you may have. But that's pretty much the process that went into creating the button. And then you can tab out of the isolation mode to then place it in those 3 positions. Now we're going to work on wrapping that strap around the back of the heel. That is something that I envisioned when I created the drawing initially, and even working on it doesn't quite look right with just them sticking out. So I think to make the design overall feel much more natural, you can wrap it around the back, which is what I'm doing right now. Really focusing on toggling between the proportional edit to select the faces and the edges to fit that curve. Just rotating over the Z or the Y-axis to allow the strap to flow. In a way, I guess, understanding the orientation of Z, X, Y, and 3D goes a long way. It is a solid fundamental part of the 3D space that you need to understand. I guess that could be another level of separation from beginner to intermediate. You'll see me toggle between the proportional edit, selecting the faces or the edges to just get that strap to wrap around as tight as I can, without it overlapping too much, as far as the meshes collapsing on top of each other, or allowing it to look a lot more natural, because there's not going to be too much space between it. The tiny little details that you sometimes may spend half an hour on goes a long way, but with time you get to be a lot more efficient as far as work speed, especially knowing your keyboard shortcuts and using them. They're time savers versus clicking around. I do find myself in a habit of still using that the 3D sphere, I guess the navigational sphere. There's a name for it. I can't think of it right now, but and then even the transform tool once in a while. But I've gotten comfortable with using the keyboard shortcut and just snapping it to X to Y to Z as I need to. But yeah, so just working that curve to fit the back of that heel. I'm gonna speed this portion up because I'm gonna spend a bit of time tweaking it, and then we'll get into the next details that we need to polish up the overall high heel design, add more flair and style to it. To tab out, and there is something I did notice on the edit mode. I have these, I'm going to turn off the proportional edit. I have these 2 or 3 edges. I'm going to go to the item menu and change the bevel weight to 0. That'll eliminate that sharp crease that was there on the surface of the back. We've made it to almost half of the tutorial, and the shoe, for the most part of the main structure, is complete. This is what we've done so far. In the next couple of steps, we're going to work on those additional details to refine it even more. Be sure to comment your thoughts so far, especially if you've been following along, if you watched the first part and you've made it this far in the second part. I look forward to reading your constructive, hopefully positive comments as I continue to create these unique tutorials for you guys. Now, I'm going to select the faces towards the back as shown, and Shift D and P to separate them. And then the goal for this is going to be that back detail right here. And then just really work around adjusting the edges, rotating to fit that overall strip and an element to complement the back of the heel. And with this part of the model, I'm going to add some edge loops and just to give me some more geometry to work with, because that piece towards the back has so much curvature. And by the way, I love high heels because I feel as an artist slash designer, there's so much that can be done with them. I've seen some pretty outrageous concepts for high heels, but there can still be innovative designs created to where it's tasteful, unique, creative, and elegant, or just beautiful. I don't think there's anything that needs to be overly dramatic, to where I guess the front tip of the high heel need to look like a dog's face or anything like that. But to each his own. Alright, so just adjusting the vertices, the edges, and I'll do this on X-ray mode, but at the same time I still use the user perspective view to rotate around, because I sort of want to see how everything is falling in place real time. One of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to end up shrink wrapping this on the back counter part of the heel. Alright, so now I'm gonna tab out and go to shrink wrap once I feel like I'm comfortable with that shape. And with the shrink wrap, I'm gonna bring it to the top of the solidify and subdivision. Gonna name that something very generic, just back detail 1. And then let's see, gonna apply the shrink wrap because I just needed it to sit on top of the surface of that mesh. And then let's see, let me do another shrink wrap. I'm gonna shrink wrap it again. Let's double check. And then offset it. Let's just adjust the offset. No, I'm going to reduce the thickness by 0.002 meters to have it sink into the mesh just a little bit. And I'm gonna test the bevel. I was trying to see if I added the level above the subdivision, if it would allow some sharper edges without making it too rigid, but no, I don't think it's helping, so I'm going to get rid of that. Just work with the actual mesh of that piece. I think the best way to work on the form is going to be just to adjust those vertices and maybe move them on the x-axis close or far away from the actual mesh. I've noticed that affects the shape as well, especially for objects that are shrink wrapped. But yeah, just working on that, so that working on the back view, adjusting those vertices. Yeah, there you go. And then for these two vertices, let me see if I bring them outward. No, that's not helping. Let's apply that shrink wrap and then just I need to bring this edge out, so I'm going to go to edge mode and then bring this one out as well. Yep, that's what I'm looking for. Now on this side, I think it looks pretty good. I don't think I need to bring it out. Let me add a blue cut towards that center to give me a bit more vertices to work with, and just adjust that. Now with that shrink wrap off, I have to be very mindful of how far I actually push or pull these vertices away from the actual back mesh. But nice thing is I can always bring it back. And let's see, this one's fine. And then, but let's bring this one backward to where it starts to fit a bit better. There you go. These are the tiny details that take extra time, and you know, and all the years, I'm gonna add another edge here, and then in all the years I've been doing digital art, because I've experienced digitally painting as well. The most detailed artworks take a lot more time. So a painting that takes 50 hours to do versus a painting that takes 2 hours or 4 hours to do is going to be dramatically different, especially if you have years of experience practicing something. I think it can be very misleading where people watch more speed modeling tutorials, or even like a tutorial like this where parts of it is cut to make the clip faster, although I'm showing the entire process, but a lot of time goes into creating a shoe like this. Just adjust the vertices. And I can't even, like, I haven't wrapped my mind, or I haven't modeled a full vehicle yet with headlights, exhaust, engines, car seats. I imagine that takes even longer. At this point, this is what we've done, and I recommend saving. And it's a good habit to save, work on saving duplicate files just in case one file gets corrupted. Now we're going to go ahead and duplicate one of the faces on the side and separate it. We're going to use that face to add that back piece element right here. I'm going to call it rear strip, and then just check. Let's turn off the solidify and subdivision because I need to see the flat geometry for now. And I'm just gonna go ahead and select the whole piece, use G to move it towards that center back, scale it down, and then just use the vertices to fit that shape right there. And just extrude, bring this back. About right here, extrude again, and then rotate, and then just bring it back. It's not always a matter of time. It's not always a matter of time. From that part to the rear of the actual heel, there is some curvature that is needed. But let's see. I'll try to straighten it. I'm gonna straighten it on the y-axis. So I'm just gonna go ahead and y0, flatten it. But then I'm gonna go to the options tab and turn on the origin to move it towards that end of the actual, or I guess the start of the edge of that piece that I'm actually extruded and modeled, because I want to rotate it or pivot it from that point. There you go. And once I have that rotated on the z-axis to that angle, I am going to, how's that looking? Yeah, let's add a bit more rotation to it. That looks good. I need to rotate it on rotate it on the Y, and then just I think use the proportional edit to kind of move both of those edges closer to the edge of that sole. Just tweaking. Just bring this out a little bit, it's overlapping. And then rotate this. Just adjust those two vertices. And then like those two, do I need to adjust them? No, they look pretty good. Alright. And then with this edge selected, I'm going to extrude inward and then move it up. I'll just rotate the edge. And then GX to bring it out a little bit. And that's looking like how I want it. With this edge selected, I'm going to bring it out a little bit. And with that overall piece, I'm going to go to object mode and add a mirror modifier. And I'm going to select the mirror object to the back heel. I'm going to set the mirror, apply the mirror modifier, and then just work on that duplicated piece and just rotate it into place. That's looking good. Yep. And with these two edges in the back, I'm going to go ahead and bridge them and then add an edge loop and bring it back. That'll give me a bit of more curve. That's looking good. Let's check reference. Yep. Alright, now let's turn back to solidify modifier, increase the offset, reduce the let's reduce the thickness to 0.0025 meters. Let's adjust the object offset, or solidify offset, I mean. And then turn back subdivision. And now this is what we have. Look at that. Not too shabby at all. And let's just bring it upward. And that's that back piece. I'm just gonna set the origin to geometry on the object, and then I think that looks good. This is where you can be really picky as far as details, but again, you only really need to work on what's going to be seen. Rarely do anyone see the bottom of high heels unless they're holding them up at a store when they're first purchasing them or something. And even in a presentation like this, if you're going to be doing a commercial or ad, you're welcome to spend hours on the tiny details. Gonna do the same method. Take a part of the face in the front and just duplicate that out and separate it to work on that front accent piece or element and design right there. Just a matter of creating multiple faces and then rotating and adjusting the vertices to get that curved shape. With solidify and subdivision turned on and modeling this in the X-ray mode, it'll allow you to see the curvature of that piece a lot clearer than if you didn't have solidify and subdivision on. Then it would be just rigid. Then you'd have to turn them on. But sometimes it can help if you model an X-ray with those modifiers turned on to have an idea of what you're looking at. I think that looks good. Let's just adjust it. And then add an extra loop cut. Oh, 2 maybe? Yeah, 2 will be good. Might be too much. Then I'm gonna rotate it on that side, bring it a little closer to the mesh, and then shrink wrap to the actual front part tip of the shoe. There you go. I think that looks good, and just adjust that position and just this is where those additional 2 just go ahead and dissolve one of them. I don't think both of them are needed. Yeah, that should be sufficient, because with the additional loop cut, it looked a little blocky. I don't know if you noticed, but that's a lot more smooth. Ooh, that is sexy. Yeah. And that detail right there, I'm not sure I want to keep it or if I want to delete it. Shrink wrap and test it. Let's bring it closer to the mesh. And rotate it a little bit. Bring it out and then shrink wrap and offset to show on the surface. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I may keep it. Let's see. Let's increase the thickness on that one. And then smooth. Doesn't make that much of a difference. 2. Doesn't look like it make that much of a difference. It's very subtle. Keep it for now. This next part, we're going to duplicate and rotate that side, and from there, with the inverse rotation, I guess, we're going to work on creating an overlap of that back detail piece. And the process is almost the same, it's just inverse. Just adjust those vertices and then add a mirror modifier, bring it to the top, and use the heel as the object to mirror. Actually, use that back piece. Once you have the pieces mirrored, we're gonna go ahead and bring those edges together. Make sure your clipping is turned on, and then on object mode you can now apply your mirror modifier because it did the job it needed to do as far as replicating that side for us. And then from here is just more adjustment of that back shape. The drawing is not, it's a bit rough. It was done by hand, no rulers or anything, so I'm just using it as a guide visually. And again, it will be accessible to you on the blog if you want to attempt to model the same shoe, or you're welcome to use your own drawings if you draw. And if you have ideas where you want to sketch and attempt to bring them to life in 3D. I'm always checking the reference in the actual shape because, you know, I draw a flat 2D artwork, and sometimes imagining it in 3D, three-dimensional space is a bit hard until you open software like Blender and you start to see how things are working or how things are not working, and you have to resolve them. So like here, I'm going to need an additional piece of geometry to add to allow that piece to bend to where it sits on that rail, I guess, element, and then add another edge loop or loop cut towards that back to give me a bit more control over the curvature, because that's the only way it's going to connect and actually work. Need to do the same thing on this side. Loop cut and then just adjust the positioning of that. I'll solidify and turn on subdivision. And it starts looking quite, like a unique piece of detail. Add another loop cut to make it a bit more sharp. Bring it close to the edge. Actually, that's backspace, Control Z and escape. I want to really focus on making sure both of the edges are somewhat aligned to each other, or perpendicular, I should say, or parallel. What's the word? Perpendicular, parallel, parallel to each other. And I'm gonna apply that solidify modifier on that piece, and then Select the sharp edges under mesh and just make sure there's no edges selected in the middle. And I'm gonna add a bevel to it. Make the shape 1. Make the width an even number, so 0.001 meters. Change the mid arc to the arc. 2 segments, and let's go to 1 segment. There you go. And then I think that's smooth enough. Okay, so before we do that, let's escape. Let's go back. Let's try adding an edge loop. Yeah, I think that works a lot better, adding an edge loop versus trying to bevel it. So just using edge loops will be sufficient because I still need that back to be smooth and curved. If I was to try to bevel it, it'd be a bit too sharp for my liking. And then there's the overlapping back piece right there. Let's go in X-ray mode because I'm going to need to select these vertices to bring them out. So GX, bring them back, GX, move that over a little bit, and there you go. Ooh, look at that. All right. That's a little disconnected. Let's try to bring that one. Rotate. Let's rotate this and bring it in. Okay. Rotate. Da da da. Let's go to X-ray mode and proportional edit. Rotate. Ooh. Try to rotate this part as well. About right there. And bring that inward. And we're almost towards the end of the final details. There's a couple more. I'm gonna zoom into the area. Detailed pieces that I'm gonna add to turn off the proportional edit. Move that over a little bit. It's overlapping. I'll bring it out. Crazy thing is, I don't think, aside from actually working on the model, I'm ever really going to be that close to the back of the hill. I do want to take some branded shots or render a branded shot of that hill with the actual logo that I am going to create for it. But aside from that, I think that's pretty good. So 2 more details left to model, and the second part of the tutorial will be complete. So I'm gonna come to the front tip and tab into edit mode, select one of those faces, Shift DP to separate a quad from that mesh, and that's going to be our side connector strip. Or elastic band that connects that front part of the hill and the back counterpart. Just gonna name these pieces. With that piece selected, I'm just gonna go ahead and work on that shape. So I'm gonna go select the top vertices as Z0 to flatten them. SY0 to make it flat, and then just scale it. And then just take that edge, bring it inside. I'm going to turn off the subdivision surface modifier. I want to see exactly where I'm placing those vertices. And then, so I imagine it's going to attach on the inside. So just want to move that inward a little bit. And then rotate to check, bring that one inside as well. So something like that. Yep. And then, so about there is good. And then let's just reduce the thickness. So 0.0025 or just 2. 2 is good. So that's going to be an elastic band that connects the actual heel. Let's make it even thinner. 0.002 meters. And then let's just duplicate that to the other side. Let's just hide that reference image because I want to see what I'm doing. And with this one, it's going to need to be longer, so I'm going to go ahead and in X-ray mode bring that towards the front. This one could stay where it's at, or it needs to move a little bit, and this one is going to need to rotate. Yep. Let's just rotate both of those vertices like that. And bring that inward. And bring this one a little bit inward and back. In all honesty, like with this specific shoe, this is more of a concept based on a 2D flat drawing I created, right? But this could then be taken to the next level to an actual engineer to measure pressure points or the weight, and to calculate how the material or whatever material is going to be used, the actual weight and how that's gonna affect a feet of a person. They have all sorts of technology now for footwear engineering. For the side strap, you can apply the modifier for the solidify modifier, and then add a bevel by selecting the sharp edges. I'm going to do the same thing here. So selecting the sharp edges, which you can do under select. You can then add a bevel, just very subtle bevel, and then with the settings, the shape can remain at 0.5, 2 segments. That should be enough. With the subdivision modifier, it'll be smooth, but at the same time, almost sharp like a rubber band, as if it would be cut on the ends, if that makes sense. All right. For this last piece of detail, we're going to bring in a circle and scale it down, move it towards the back of the heel, scale it as so, come to the back view, and just move it in place, right? And then from here, I'm gonna bring back our side reference, and this is where I'm going to create those I don't know how to describe them, but those strips, strip wires that will wrap around the back of the hill. And in this step, what I'm going to do is take that circle that we brought in, and then I didn't calculate how many vertices I needed, but realizing there's too many of them, so one thing I can do to reduce the amount of vertices is go to select and check or deselect, and then dissolve those vertices, right? So I can go to the menu, the right menu, and then dissolve, or I can go to X and then dissolve vertices and do it again to reduce it. So really all I need is 8 vertices. And then from there, I'm going to delete half of them. So the front half, I am going to bring back, let's rotate the whole thing first, and then take that front half and bring it upward. And then scale it on the x-axis. But I'm not going to need that middle, I'm not going to need that middle vertices, so I can delete it and just adjust those like that. So that's like the first piece, right? And then from there, I am going to just work on the placement of the vertices. I want them inside of the back piece. And I needed to start with a circle because I needed that back, the back loop to be as smooth as possible, right? The circle is the best way to go about that. And then I'm going to add a subdivision modifier to it. It's not going to look like it did much yet, but I then add a skin to it. And with the skin, I'm going to hit Control A to scale it down on edit mode and just bring it up top of, no, actually, I'm going to leave it on top, and then I'm going to add another subdivision modifier below the skin to make it smooth. And then let's just rotate to take a look at it. It's looking pretty good. Yeah, I'm gonna just adjust that back piece to where it's really sitting on the back of the hill. Compared to the image, it's not quite aligned, so I'm just gonna rotate it in object mode and adjust it that way. Okay. Add an array modifier. How many do I need? I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I need about 7 of them, or 8. Is it 8? Yep, I need 8, or 8 count. And then from there, once I have the array modifier, I can then move it to the top and then apply it. Once I apply it, then I'll be able to adjust each one of these. So I'm gonna add vertices by using the edge loop or loop cut method. Actually, what can I do? can I dissolve them? I cannot dissolve the vertices, so the only thing I could do is delete them. Now once I delete them, I'll have to go back and mark root again, so I can add the vertices to each strip, and then from there at the end dissolve those edges. So it's like adding a loop cut, but only with the vertices, and I'm doing it twice to where there's one that shows behind like that strip. It's kind of hard to see it. I guess in x-ray mode makes sense, and then I'm adjusting them to then dissolve the one that's a little bit further ahead. Gonna repeat the same process until I get all of them in place, and this marks the end of part 2 for how to design high heels in 3D using Blender. In the next tutorial, I will be texturing as well as adding the logo and branding to the actual high heel. So be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell to know when the next tutorial drops.